This week's episode of Fearless Flight Live with my just so reliable a crew, all on-time performance. I got Diane and Elaine and Eric and me, Capt, and Dieter maybe come sliding in like a man sliding into home plate here in just a minute. So he got held up a little bit up there. And so tonight we are going to, well, first of all, you know why you're here. If you don't know why you're here, you're probably in the wrong place. But if you're here because you're afraid to fly, or you know somebody who's afraid to fly, or you just like to learn about airplanes and aviation, that's what we do every week on Fearless Flight Live here. And let me start my slides here. Okay. And that's the sound of Dieter dinging in, I believe. So, okay. So, oh, of course, I went to the wrong one. I'm gonna go back. Stand by. I've got to get the slides back in order here. Come on. Oh, I love it. Where did my there we go. All righty. And shout out for our Facebook group. We're waiting for the magic number of how many, Elaine?
Right now, we are at 685 members, so we're 15 members away from 700. And the lucky 700th member will receive their choice of either the Fearless Flight Kit or a free 60-minute coaching session with Captain Ron. Blah, that was a mouthful. So anyway, please tell your friends, tell your neighbors. Lucky 700th winner will get some great prizes.
Yeah, get 14 of them to do it and then go right after they do.
Yes.
As soon as we announced it, everybody quit signing up there. So hope it wasn't something we said there.
I know.
Tonight, we're going to talk about 101 class again briefly. Got a little bit of a change on that. We're going to review chapter 9, which is about turbulence, which is everybody's favorite topic. And we got just a brief aviation news update live Q&A. If you've got questions, please put them in the leave us a remark there, and we'll answer those if we have time. And we do have some questions that we carried over from last week and a new one or two. So we always try to do that. Poll question tonight, since it's about turbulence, is it a good strategy to search turbulence.com or some other site like that to see if you will encounter turbulence during your flight? Okay, so that's the question. We're just curious to see what everybody does. I kind of think if some of you wise ones out there, you will see through the question and put the right answer in there, but we'll see what everybody does. Put your honest answer in there. I mentioned Clear for Takeoff 101, we got the go-ahead and support from Southwest Airlines here at Phoenix and the Phoenix Airport folks. And last week I said in April, I checked into that more. We're not going to be able to pull that off. We got some stuff to do for the web and then some stuff to get ready for the airport and the live class. So we're pushing it back to May 1st in Phoenix, and that'll go back to what we were doing before for a predictable time, which is the first Saturday of every month for the live class in Phoenix. So the first Saturday of May is May 1st. So if you live in the area or you're passing through Phoenix and want to come and join us, please do so. We'd love to have you. Okay, Coach's Corner. Tonight we're going to review the book again, as I mentioned. Tonight we're going to do chapter 7, which is all about turbulence. So without further ado, let's get right into it. And turbulence isn't danger, it's just annoying. And I know that is really hard for people to accept out there, but it's really true. What are some of the things that they do to make sure that the airplane's strong enough, Eric, for turbulence?
Well, there's tremendous design inputs, and the airplane can be stressed far beyond normal operation design limits. And as you mentioned, the hit we feel when we hit a bump is nowhere near any kind of limit stress load it just hurts our body when we hit it. As you said, like going down a gravel road at 500 miles per hour, it kind of hurts when you hit the bumps.
Exactly. And it's not just annoying, it's damned annoying. So what is turbulence? Okay. So turbulence itself is nothing more than wind shear. I use the term wind shear up here because the media often associates wind shear with a particular kind of turbulence, which we're going to discuss in just a minute in more detail. But any turbulence is due to wind shear. And that means basically if I had a handful of ping pong balls representing air molecules in one hand and another handful in the other hand, and I threw them together, they'd be chaotic and they'd bounce all over, which is what that slide up here is symbolized to represent. And that is whenever wind is blowing in one direction with wind air molecules, and it runs into, in this case, it's running head on, and it runs into air moving in another direction, wherever those molecules meet, it causes a turbulent airflow. And of course, that's where it gets the name turbulence. And it's not really the turbulence that in and of itself that I just described that's the problem. It's when we try to fly through it at 500 miles an hour in our airplane. So this is just symbolizes you take an airplane plus some disrupted air out there. It's kind of like a whitewater rapids if you've ever had that experience in a kayak or in a done any whitewater rafting. Whenever you go through those turbulent areas where the water runs into the shore or rocks or another river coming in, it causes turbulence there. And so that's really what causes the disruption. That's why you can fly along and it can be smooth without any detectable disruption in your flight path or anything. And then all of a sudden you run into an area, well, you've just hit an area that has gone turbulence. So this slide has everything you'd ever want to know about the various kinds of turbulence. And it's got a little airplane flying along up here, and this is the flight path, looking at the terrain down there. So on the talk about the thermal part first there, Eric.
So the aircraft is flying along the little dashed lines, and you see we have long arrows coming up from the ground and short arrows expressing the magnitude of thermal heating. Not much off of water, but more off of land. So the air is rising at different rates off both those different features of terrain. And when the airplane flies horizontally through it, it's going to feel bumps as a result of that, or turbulence. Okay,
and so people ask, what time is the best time of day to fly or the best season? Well, if you're concerned only about this thermal turbulence here, the best time of day would be, or the best place to do that would be where it's cooler outside. And then the sun's influence on them. So northern climates typically, and particularly during the winter up there. If you're just talking about the thermal reflection or the thermal currents coming from the reflection of the sun's rays. Now, when you get into the summer and you're over a desert like Phoenix, where it gets really, really hot, it's going to be not as reflective in the morning when the sun's lower, and then as the sun gets higher in the sky, it's going to be greater thermal rising, and so then you would want to try to maybe plan your flights in the morning, and early in the morning when it gets to be 100 plus in an area like Phoenix or Las Vegas or so. So for that particular type of issue, you want to try to if you want to try to avoid it, is to take off in the morning. But if you got a long flight, you're going to get it primarily at lower altitudes. And I don't know, Eric, what do you think? Like in the winter, we might get turbulence, thermal turbulence up to 3,000, something like that in the desert. And then in the summer, maybe as high as 15, maybe?
Sure. That's probably very close to correct. And I was just going to make a tongue-in-cheek remark that if you don't want to hit the bumps in the summer, you got to take the first flight of the day and get up at 3 a.m., already be packed and go. So whether you hit a bump or not, you're going to take that pain for sure. That'll be guaranteed.
Yeah. And then moving along, they've got a mountain here, and you can see the winds as they come from the left side of the screen, or we'll say the west, because high altitude winds typically come from the west. Obviously, when they hit the mountain, they're going to be bumped and projected and pushed upward. And a lot of things happen with that. If you got warm, moist air in there, it'll cause clouds and whatnot. And then when it breaks over the top of the mountain, it starts to go back to equalize the pressure like it was before, and it starts to slide down there. And you can see where the airplane is here. This is an exaggeration, folks, but like this is why Denver typically, which lies out here at the right hand side of the mountains there in the United States, this is why you'll get these things, a fancy name, standing lenticular clouds. They have a very unique appearance to them, and it's basically a rotor cloud. You get winds that are swirling there, and so that's why it typically is bumpy going into Denver, and I should say more often than not, why landing in Denver is like that. Now they did, when they built a new airport, it's what, 20 miles there further east, I think.
Yes, we used to refer to it as Southwest Nebraska Regional. It's a long ways away from the front range.
Long ways away. Yeah.
And so that helped a little bit, but when you get, I mean, you can get it in the wintertime at 14,000 feet, which is what the tops of those peaks are in the Rockies, just to the west of Denver there. You can get 150 mile an hour winds down there. And so you can imagine it can be very turbulent. And yet I've flown over there. I flew in and out of Denver for 10 years of the first part of my my airline career. And we took off sometimes going the west and not a bump in the sky. So there's nothing. I'm working with several people right now coaching who are either flying or on the verge of flying, and all of them, they just want to know, is there ever a time when I don't have turbulence? And, the answer is yes, but you can't predict it. It's tough. And the worse you feel on the inside makes it harder and harder to get on the airplane because you're worried about that. And then the last one there, with the big towering cumulus there, this is the kind that we characterize with thunderstorms, or we describe thunderstorm activity, particularly in the plains, particularly as we get into the spring or into the fall. This is, if you watched the news at all last week, what they had a terrible bunch of tornadoes in Alabama, I think this last week, spread out down through the Southwest there. I know I had a fearful flyer on Saturday who was flying, and she was a little nervous. She hadn't flown in a while. She was going from San Diego to Atlanta, and we were talking about it, and she was saying, should I do this? Should I not fly or what like that? And I said, what you should do is stop worrying about the turbulence and just learn to make friends with that. And she does great. She hadn't flown in a year, so with COVID and all that. And so she said, what's the worst that can happen? And I said, because there were thunderstorms in the landing in the vicinity of Atlanta. And I was half joking, but I said, what's the worst that can happen? You may end up going to your alternate and putting on some more fuel. Lo and behold, she texted me.
Did she really?
And she said, Rod, we landed at the alternate. Okay.
Fired.
And I said, that's the good news. Okay. And it really was, in a way, because she went through that adversity. So her amygdala was queued up, which is what it takes in order to get better. You can't change your amygdala unless it's a little bit agitated. That's what makes it so hard when you're not flying to think what it's like with the stress and all when you are flying. So anyway, and she got to experience the whole enchilada. So they put gas on, they were delayed there. They had their crew timed out, so they had to wait for another crew coming in from Baltimore. So it was like 2 hours after they landed all that. So just about anything you could think that would happen that would be not my first choice as a fearful flyer happened. And so I said, now guess what? Now you get to enjoy your 2 weeks because you've had it all. And she'll totally enjoy it. So it was kind of funny. But the thunderstorms are when we get in the United States, typically when we have a big cold air mass coming down from Canada, and it runs into a warm, moist air mass coming up off the Gulf of Mexico. And when they run together, the cold air is heavier. So it settles down and it gets underneath the warm air mass, or warm, moist air mass, and it starts to raise the air. And you see those arrows going up. They first go up and they go up and if there's moisture in the air mass, like there typically is in a thunderstorm, what happens is as soon as it gets up and where the wind, when the wind gets, or the air gets cold, it condenses and turns into water. And then the cold air is heavier again. So now it turns around and starts to go down, and you've got the warm air coming up. And so it starts kind of a washing machine cycle. And it can be so volatile that it can support golf ball or grapefruit size hail under some conditions like that. And I get so many people that tell me when they flew for years and had a bad experience, that bad experience turns out to be thunderstorms and going around them. And every one of them swore that the pilots took them through a thunderstorm. I don't know about you, Eric, but I've never flown through one. Have you flown through one?
No, I don't think I've ever flown through one accidentally.
No. And how do we keep from flying through it? Because we can be in the clouds and getting bumped around, and the average passenger thinks we're in it. So how do we protect ourselves from that?
We have ground advice, ground radar, we have forecasts, we have live radar in the airplane, and now with all the magic we're carrying in the iPads, we have a link to that, and we can actively see the storm systems on the pads hundreds of miles before we get there. So
and that's a cool thing, because before, even with radar is good, but we can only see a couple 100 miles out, which is what, maybe 20 minutes or so at cruise speeds. And now talk about the iPad there, and because you have a live link to that, right?
Yeah, so the live link, and so before there's any pressure to turn, you can work on a reroute with your dispatcher, air traffic control, make a shallow turn, that kind of thing, instead of running right up on it and say, no, I need to turn right now, just like everybody else. Ow! Yeah, you can take care of all that before there's a big jam, and it's very, very nice.
Because the earlier we can, if we can identify when we want to change our flight plan, because there's other airplanes out there and we're all protected by air traffic control. We can declare an emergency and do that, but you got to have a good reason to do that. So what we want to do is identify the need to change our course early on, and talk to the controller ahead of time. Like Eric said, it's, go ugly early. It's much better if you can plan your deviations further out there. In the past, without the uplinks and the live streaming information that the crew members have with the iPads now, we had to rely on the controllers and other airplanes as much. And speaking of the controllers and other airplanes, what's our number one strategy? Avoid it. It's avoiding thunderstorms for sure, but avoiding turbulence in general. And Eric already touched on this. One way is to look at the weather forecast before we get on the ground, but and hence back to our poll question. What I asked is do you go online at turbulence.com or weather.com or one of the other domains and look at your intended route of flight and see if you're going to have turbulence or not? And the answer is, ready, class? No. Because all it's going to do is upset you if you see there's turbulence along your route, or if you don't see it and then you get into turbulence, you're going to say, well, there goes your trust, even eroded even further. These charts that you could see in turbulence.com are old. You can look at the same ones the pilots are, but by the time you get there, if you're going from Phoenix to Chicago or beyond, you're talking about 3.5 hours down the road, and thunderstorms can build from nothing to 40,000 feet in a couple of minutes. So it's not a good strategy to look at this, because it causes needless worry. You'd be better off spending your time listening to the harmonizer and zoning out, if you would. So, all right. How do we avoid it? Let's talk a little bit about strategies for avoiding it. What do we do? We're up there flying along. We're getting bounced around. What are some of the things that we can do?
Well, as mentioned before, we have a radar, and we have air traffic controllers, and we have a company dispatcher who's monitoring sections of flights and our flight that can suggest alternate routings. And if we need to be proactive on our own, and we just walked into an area, quote unquote, walked into and didn't anticipate that, we can find out from other airplanes higher and lower if they're having the same experience, and we can query the controller if we can change altitude, try higher altitude or lower altitude, and or a turn. other flights are experiencing the same thing.
Okay. And we're constantly talking to the controllers, particularly when we're in clear air turbulence where you can't see any clouds or you don't have a good indicator as to why there's turbulence out there, but you're in it anyway. And we talk to air traffic control who's talking to the other airplanes, and he's asking them, the ones that were in the area that we're in or about to go in, he's asking them about their ride, their altitude, and he knows their altitude and all that. And so he can help us by saying, there's an airplane in front of you that transited through there. They also had turbulence, but they climbed a couple thousand feet and they had a much better ride. And believe me, it is our goal, even above your goal, because when I say it's annoying, it's definitely annoying. And we don't like it any more than you do. So we're always trying to make ourselves more comfortable and give you a better ride. So recap, these are the takeaways. Again, this is from chapter 9 out of the How to Overcome Fear of Flying book. Remember, turbulence is due to wind shear. That's air molecules bumping into each other through no fault of their own or our own. And our primary strategy is to avoid that at all costs. It's not the turbulence that creates the bumps per se. It's the fact that we choose to fly through the area where the airflow is turbulent at a high speed, like a speed bump. And if you drive over a speed bump in a parking lot or on a street at a slower speed, you get a much less noticeable bump than you do if you take it at a high speed. So it's not a threat, turbulence that is, to a modern jetliner. They're built to withstand anything that Mother Nature can throw out and more. And while it disrupts your sense of peace and serenity, it is not anything more than a nuisance, and it certainly is not a real danger. I'll do a quick shout out. If you haven't participated or taken advantage of this is a free guide. Expert Turbulence and Takeoff Guide. This is a free download, and there's the link down in the lower left-hand corner. It's a very popular download, and like I said, it is free, and it has the two most often complained about things for fearful flyers, and they are turbulence and takeoff. We got a few questions here that we want to round out the evening with, and the first one is, we talked about how airplanes are built to withstand turbulence, and yet there was so one of the questions was, can the tail of a plane tear off during sending it out of control? And I don't know whether this person, I didn't ask this person whether they had seen the accident report of this or not, but I'm guessing they probably did. So that would seem to be in direct contrast to what Eric and I just said. Turbulence can't damage an airplane. So Eric, what was it about this particular accident that caused that not only the tail plane but the two engines came off the pylons as well? Sure.
This is pretty interesting, and Ron said I could have 2 minutes per, Dave, so we're going to try and get through both your questions. In 2001, an A300 Airbus, early generation of Airbus offerings, was taking off out of Kennedy.
And this came right just 2 weeks after 9/11, which is the other.
Yeah, and the first officer who was flying at the time made rapid and significant rudder displacements in an attempt to countermand wake turbulence that he was running over with the airplane. And by virtue of quickly reversing rudder deflection and using a lot of force, he tore the rudder off the airplane.
What he did was, if you can see the plane there, I don't know how visible that is, but he pushed on the rudder, which makes it yaw to the right there, and it puts a side load on the airplane. And then as the airplane was adjusting, and before it could completely adjust, he went in the other way, and he exaggerated that. So he's exerting forces due to the high speed of the airplane. It has more force on the side to side swishing movement, if you will, and that puts side loads on the airplane, which caused the rudder to separate and caused the two engines to break off of the pylons here. Go ahead.
So
Sorry.
260 people were killed and 5 more on the ground as a result of that, and a lot of things were discovered. The airlines were faulted, the manufacturers were faulted for not publishing a more significant set of operational restrictions in how we operate the airplane. The airlines immediately sent out bulletins and started training their pilots in the sim instructions on how to operate the airplane in turbulence and not to be using those kind of control inputs. And one of the most interesting asides to that accident, I thought, was the first officer was an ex-military pilot and had flown.
He was the one flying at this time. Yeah.
Yes. And had flown what I think is the coolest fighter plane ever built, the McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantom. And the Phantom is absolutely as close to indestructible as an airplane was ever made. The Phantom had no limit airspeeds, could tumble out of control at any airspeed, would not give up parts unless somebody shot it with a missile. And one of the techniques they used on it in Vietnam was dragging a little bit of rudder. As Ron said, they were actually trained that way, drag some rudder to give it a stiff, straight line through turbulence. And with just the pilot in it, strapped in a star harness, he didn't feel the discomfort that much. And so this was part of his background body of knowledge, thinking, hey, it worked in that plane, maybe it'll work in this plane. That was led to believe as part of his decision-making process leading up to this disaster.
And just a note of support to the pilot and everybody and how we got into that mess is that they hit wake turbulence, which was unexpected from a larger airplane that had taken off. And that's a very dramatic, when the airplane is much, much larger than you, even though they had the required separation at takeoff, when they hit that wake turbulence, it caused the airplane to immediately tip up with a large degree of bank. And in my experience, I know Eric does this as well. When I'm flying with a relatively new or an inexperienced pilot, prior to this time for sure, what I would say is, don't do anything. Just let it go, because it will dampen itself out because of the inherent design, namely that the wings are bent up a little bit, and it'll calm itself down automatically. But this particular pilot overreacted, and we can all understand what overreaction is about, particularly as fearful flyers, and that's what created the problem. So very tragic, and it's one of those things that we talk about where we have tragedies. And the sad thing is that people often lose their lives. The positive thing is it saves a lot more lives in the long run because we learn so much from that. Okay, the next question that we had was the question was, can a faulty gasoline cause the airplane to explode in midair? Let me say a quick little bit. This particular airplane, in the accident we were just talking about that crashed in New York, taken off out of Kennedy, they had just a ton of eyewitnesses there that saw this, and they had over half of them swore that the airplane blew up in flight. So this is one of the things that why they discount eyewitness reports, because everybody sees things that are really not there. So anyway, moving on to, so can a faulty gasoline cause an airplane to explode? What say you, Eric, about that?
Well, I did some research for you, Dave, no charge. The general answer to that is absolutely not. If you had a volatile fuel mixture that would actually explode, the range that you could ignite it and use it in the jet engine is so narrow, it's highly unlikely you could ever start the engine at all and get it to run. I did do a little research on fuel contamination, which is a big concern for the airlines, and a group of petroleum engineers, they are petroleum engineers after all, established a joint inspection group. I won't tell you what that acronym is. They're not after the political correctness, but the joint inspection group started running standards and how people would test fuel. And the main thing they do is when fuel is stored, generally in giant tanks under big airports, they drain water off it once or twice a day, and it is filtered twice before it's loaded into a truck or out of a tank into a vehicle that uploads it directly into the airplane to remove contaminants. And in general, the more water you get out, the fewer contaminants you have in the fuel. At this point, 2,500 airports and 40% of the world's fuel supply is covered by these standards. And now the Energy Institute and the American Petroleum Engineers are publishing upstream standards to cover aviation fuel. So it's the fuel is carefully monitored and filtered before it is ever loaded into the airplane. And I can in my career not remember at the office one case of contaminated fuel. And if you said, I don't know what the number is now, you have to fly until you're 4,179 years old. You have to take a trip every day to be involved in an aircraft accident. Well, a
Actually,
contaminated
91,000 and
91,000, you would have to probably be 100 times that. So you would have to be 91,000. You have to be 9,100,000 years old to be in an airplane involved in a contaminated fuel issue. Which
So
would
there
give you
are
a lot
more,
of-
there are many,
give you a lot of
many,
miles.
many, yeah, there are many, 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 many links in the chain from fuel being refined until it gets to where it can be put in an airplane. And so it's very, very unlikely that that would happen.
Ron did mention this. Credit to Ron last week. He said if the fueler comes up and you happen to notice him in an airport uniform, but he looks like Wile E. Coyote and the fuel truck says Acme Jet Fuel, then maybe it's the time to get out of the seat, walk downstairs the ramp and see what's going on. But other than that, of all the stuff you guys like to worry about, you need to move that one down your list.
Perfect. All right. Last question.
So Ron, we do have a couple of questions.
Okay, go ahead.
From
Go ahead.
the Facebook.
And welcome, Dieter. Go
yeah,
ahead.
hey, I've slid in there right a couple minutes late. So, first of all, Deanna wanted to know with the turbulence in particular, what you recommend that somebody actually then tells themselves as they encounter turbulence. Like she's asking for the steps of what she can do when the turbulence hits. How can she coach herself through it?
Perfect. You practice ahead of time. You use the harmonizer to distract yourself. And even as you're going through the turbulence, turn up the volume, listen up. But one of the things you say to yourself is, okay, I recognize that this is turbulence, and it's my story that I'm telling myself about the turbulence, not the turbulence. So you do a quick dive into your rider brain, you get away from the elephant, and you acknowledge the elephant. Yes, I know you're worried, but this is something that I've gone over time and time again. And there's other things that we can do, other strategies that you can learn in coaching about things, activities that you can do at that time. But primarily, you need to acknowledge that you're having anxiety. One, identify the source, which is some kind of a trigger, in this case, turbulence. And two, confront it and say, I know you're worried, talking to that little voice inside of you, but there's nothing to worry about. It's just uncomfortable and it will pass. That's the primary thing you want to do when you've been triggered, whether it's turbulence or anything else.
And the next question, kind of dovetailing, because I think Deanna's actually, maybe you can put that in the comments, Deanna, but I think she is in Phoenix. So can you repeat the actual current date as of like right now for the next cleared for takeoff? There was some confusion between May and April.
Yep, it's going to be May 1st, May Day. Okay, because we had just had too much to do to get it ready for the April 17th. I shouldn't even say the April date. May, first day of May. Happy May Day. That's when we're going to do it. It's a Saturday, and then we will repeat the cycle that we were in before COVID-19, and that is the first Saturday of every month, at least for the foreseeable future. So it's May 1st, and as soon as we get that up and running, we'll put it out here. We'll certainly have it by next week, I'm imagining, and we'll send out for anybody's in the group or on our Facebook page or on our list. We will send you notice about that. And if it's been a while, I got several people who have attended the class in the past, and they just want to come back to the class and kind of get a booster shot. So
fair warning though, there's a limit of 50 people, and so when we do open, everything is really ready. We just had the pages for April 17th, so I'm glad that I was late, otherwise the wrong pages would have gone out. So we will send out an email tomorrow to the list. So if you're not on the list, make sure you download that guide, the turbulence guide. They'll automatically put you into our system, and if you're already connected to us, then we'll make sure to send out an email. And Elaine, like in the past, we're also Oliver Fry. Hey, Oliver, he's already interested in attending the 101 class in Phoenix. And Oliver, I believe you are from somewhere San Diego.
No, Oliver's Burbank, in the Burbank area.
Yeah, Burbank. Yeah. So anyway, California. So in the past, there have been people some willing to fly, but most driving to the class. And we've been, connecting people through our Birds of a Feather Facebook group with ride sharing. So definitely make use of that. If you're interested, call out and see if anybody else might be thinking about going to the class in Phoenix. So yeah, and the last question is, does it make any sense to talk to the pilots about turbulence? How we always recommend talk to the pilots, talk to the flight attendants, but is there any merit is what the question is. Wouldn't the pilots kind of brush you off anyways?
No, the merit in talking to the pilots is to always connect with them before you get on. So that's the merit of that. If you want to talk about turbulence and tell them that really bothers you, I'm sure they'd be more than willing to tell you we're going to have some today, or we're expecting it, or should be a smooth ride, whatever. But the value in connecting with the pilots is just for that, just to make sure that you recognize that that's a real live human being up there just like you, and they value their safety above yours when push comes to shove. But yes, it is a great idea to talk to them about turbulence if it bothers you, but it's a better idea just to connect with them. So you tell the gate agent you have a medical condition, you need to either board early or get a special seat, depending on whether your seat is pre-assigned or not. You get down, you meet the flight attendant, like Diane, you say, hey, I'm a little nervous about flying. Could I meet the pilots? And I would say 9 times out of 10, they're gonna introduce you to the pilots. You get to go up in the cockpit. Hi, my name is Ron. I'm a little nervous about flying. Can you tell me anything about today's flight that would be anything is of importance to me? In fact, I'm worried about turbulence. So what do you think? So definitely do that. Okay. Any others, Dieter?
That's just quick shout out to Erin Ladybug. She has she's down for live streaming again. She's wanting to come to the class, and I just asked her. So thank you, Erin, for hopefully making it happen that we put it up on Facebook again like we used to in the past. So
you bet.
We'll see.
Okay.
That's it from here.
Last question that we had then, back to Eric. Generally speaking, is it less bumpy, turbulent, noticeable if you sit by the wings or the middle of the airplane? People ask, where's the best place to sit? I say first class because everything is better in first class, but that's a different reason. So smoother or not in the wings or the middle of the airplane, Eric?
I'm going with it depends on your brand of bumps that you like. If you like it to be in a pickup truck and ride the bed and take serious jolts, then right over the wing is where you want to be, because you'll get the direct impact of the bump. If you don't mind swinging back and forth a little bit as the airplane dissipates it, the far aft and the tail you won't feel the jolt as much, but you're going to swing sideways a little bit.
Yeah. And so sideways, get stick in the back, up and down this way. But you do have the wings out there, and when you see them bouncing, just imagine you're not bouncing as much as they are. Or let me put it this way, you're bouncing slower than they are because they're like big leaf springs.
Right.
So.
Or as you said, sit in first class, feel smug, and have a drink for no charge.
And for a fearful flyer who's freaked out about turbulence, no place on the airplane is going to make the kind of difference that you're hoping for as to where you sit up there.
That's true.
Okay. So it just sucks to be turbulent. So, okay. Anybody got anything else? Elaine, the tips.
Ron, yes.
All right, she's got Tip Tuesday.
And tonight's topic actually slides right into that. So if rough air has you rattled, in addition to listening to your harmonizer, of course, and telling yourself this is really annoying, but it's not harmful, you can also distract yourself. And one of the ways that Captain Ron recommends is writing your name with your non-dominant hand. If you don't have a paper and pencil handy, grab your cell phone in your non-dominant hand and play a little video game on your cell phone. That's something that got me through a flight across country when we flew over some pretty rough air, and the pilot was trying to find good air for us and could not. So we just bumped along, and I just used my cell phone, non-dominant hand, and played a little video game. And before I knew it, I wasn't even thinking about the turbulence. So distract yourself, use your non-dominant hand, because to your brain, that's novel, that's brand new. So obviously your brain is going to be thinking about that input, going, what? You don't usually write with your left hand. What are you doing to me? And you won't even have a chance to think about the turbulence. So that's your Tip Tuesday for this week. Happy flying.
Cool. And that's exactly right. Because the motor sides of our right hand is controlled by the left hemisphere. When you switch from your dominant hand to your non-dominant hand, you are actually causing your brain to be disrupted. Disruption and distraction are the two biggest changes that you need to get on the airplane the quickest. And then you can learn all this other stuff down the road. Diane, not much tonight, but you have a early get up. Tell us about the glamour part of the job.
Yeah, the glamour part. Well, my one addition was make sure you keep your seatbelt fastened.
There you go. Yeah.
And then you can always, if you're bouncing around a little bit, you can look at your flight attendants, because if we're in our jump seats and we're bouncing around, the most annoying part is if you're reading a book, it's hard to read. So usually, if you look at the flight attendants and they're just sitting there, chill, then you can be as well. Yeah, the glamour part is I have to leave my house in about 20 minutes to get to the airport. I have a flight that leaves around a little after 9 this evening to Durango. And then I will probably get about 3.5, 4 hours sleep if I'm lucky, and then get back up on the van around 5 in the morning. And because it's an hour ahead, because we don't observe daylight savings time.
And that's known affectionately as a
yes, no, I'm
stand up overnight.
It's called a stand up. We're called stand-ups because when we all get in, we debate whether or not we're just going to sleep in our uniforms. And I'll be home tomorrow morning, probably about 7:30 and 7:45 in the morning. So glamorous. Yeah, really glamorous. No food, no sleep. Trying to fix the
We'll quit there because now they're probably having doubts as to what kind of shape you'll be in. But
I'll be great. No. We're always great.
And we know about it in advance, so we can prepare and nap and do those kinds of things.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It's
something. I rested today, and I'll rest tomorrow when I get home.
It's a part of the industry, and that's the way
and
it
lots
is.
of coffee. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So everybody, thanks again to all of you. Thanks again to all of you watching us, and we'll see you here next week again for another episode of Fearless Flight Live. So have a great week, everybody.
Have a good week.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.
Tuesday, happy Easter. Or we could just stay on till next Tuesday.